I'm a fourth-year PhD candidate at Emory, and I'm really excited to meet all of you here. I want this webinar to be as interactive as possible, so please ask any questions you have in the chat box as directed. So let's get started. All right, so I wanted to give you this chart because I think it's important to look at what has been previously done in the past. And so the US is by far the largest hosting country of international students. And in the number of international students in the US have been growing steadily. So as you can see from 1999 to up to 2018 and 19 academic year, it's been growing a lot. And for the graduate scholars, including master's and PhD students, we take up about 43% of the total enrollment by international students. And so this is just for me to highlight, to say, like, we're not here by ourselves. There are a ton of people here who's gone through the same journey as you're about to embark on it. And I highly encourage you to seek out help if you need it, because you're not alone here. Another thing to note is the optional practical training is OPT. It's something like a work visa where you can, after you get a degree, either bachelor's, master's, or PhD, you can work in the field of study and get paid. And that number has also been growing significantly in the recent years. And so this is actually something that I used during my gap years between my bachelor's degrees and before starting grad school. As a STEM major, you can also extend this OPT process. Usually it's a 12-month period, but you can extend it to up to 24 month. So another option to have if you decide to take a gap year after your college. Second data set I wanted to share was for STEM majors is a great news, because this STEM fields are really dominating in terms of number of students that are pursuing this field. And so the engineering, math, and computer sciences, and also physical and life sciences all together really make up the major pie of the chart. And that's followed by business and management. I should mention the blue and red bars are the 2017 or 18 academic years. And then the percent numbers are the percent growth from previous year. So you can see that the field of study that we're pursuing is really dominating in terms of number of students in the US. So here's the outline of the webinar that we'll be discussing. And I wanted to start with our stories, because I think it helps us share our stories and see where we're coming from, and maybe help you relate to what our experiences have been and what we think that are made our application stronger and unique. Things to consider before applying, there are a lot of them, but we selected a few to discuss. The general timeline of the application process, what to expect during the interview weekend as an international student, and what to expect after you get accepted. And fellowships for international students, once they're accepted, there are plenty of options for students to apply for. And so we wanted to touch upon those too, and frequently asked questions. So let me start with my journey. So here's a timeline of my not so straight line journey, where I started in South Korea. I was born and raised, and I wasn't in the US until I was 15, when I became an exchange student in Berlin, Connecticut. And then I moved on to many different locations in the US, as you can see over the years. So I started, I was born in South Korea in the red region. It's all the way down south here. And I decided to take an 18-hour flight because I realized that I wanted to find the biggest educational opportunity for STEM research. And so here am I. As an exchange student, I met with this beautiful family who really inspired me to be the person I am today. And I'm really thankful that I met them in my first year, because I think that was my turning point to motivate me to stay in the States ever since then. So really half of my life has been spent in the US. And I wanted to make it clear that when I was applying as an international student, my application process may be a little bit different, because I was educated in the US most of the time for college and part of the high school. And also, I was currently residing in the States when I was applying. And I think that complements Mariella's story, which is a little bit different. She was applying from outside the US. So I think that you can kind of hear from both of our perspectives. So after my first year, I went to the West Coast to finish my high school degree. And again, met with another beautiful host family who's been really supportive along the way. And I decided to move back east for college in Pennsylvania. And my program was a little bit specific in that I was able to get 2 bachelor's degrees out of it through a partnership program between Immaculata University and Thomas Jefferson University in allied health and biotechnology. And behind all these academic degrees and careers, I also wanted to highlight some of the extracurricular activities I've done, which really helped me challenge myself in a different light and also learn so much more about the American experience. And so I was a student athlete, a track and cross-country runner, and I also am a passionate science advocate, and I volunteered my time in the science festivals and as a citizen teacher in New York. And so these are some of the experiences that I think made my application a little bit more unique and more personal, because not just the science and research, but also how I interact with the rest of the community really matters. So after that, I wasn't sure whether PhD was a right fit for me. And so I decided to take some gap years, ended up taking 3 gap years, worked as a research assistant at Columbia. One of the co-founding founders of Científico Latino, Olivia, is actually my coworker my first year, actually the whole 2.5 years at Columbia. And it's been a really wonderful experience. And it was my first exposure to neuroscience research, which really motivated me to pursue neuroscience PhD after that. And so currently I am a PhD candidate studying really from all of my journey, my experiences, my personal life stories. I think the big theme has been always continuous learning. And now in my PhD work, I've been studying how neurons learn new information. And so it really kind of highlights and kind of integrates everything that I've, lived through my entire career. And so really excited to share some of my experiences. Couple things I wanted to highlight about when writing a statement of purpose. One is networking. So this is something that you can do, you should do early and often. And I did this as an example, as a junior year in college, junior year in college, I was a co-founding president of Health Sciences Club. And I reached out to really cold email people to make tours around the pharmaceutical companies because I wanted to expand my network and also learn about career opportunities in the science field. And to my surprise, Novartis accepted, and they made this a beautiful 4-hour program for us to tour around the company, meet with the scientists individually, and also learn about their internship and job opportunities. And then from that meeting, I continued my connections and actually landed on the paid summer internship. And I think that was my first experience in the research. It was my first time learning about the scientific method, from generating hypotheses to writing up and presenting that research with the community. And Keith has been my mentor ever since. So highly recommend networking because you never know what kind of new experiences you will have that will really reinforce your motivation for studying. And then poster presentation is another thing. What good is science when you don't share with the rest of the community? And so I highly encourage you to all share your science with the rest of the world. So if also possible, there are programs that you're interested in applying. There may be some recruitment opportunities for you to attend and also meet with the admissions committee members. And if possible, you can present a poster. So for example, at Emory, they have an annual STEM Research and Career Symposium. And I attended before I applied, met with the admissions committees and really try to understand what they're looking for and whether I can see myself being here for 5+ years. And obviously it worked out. And so I highly encourage you to reach out to local schools if possible and present as much as possible. Those of you who are interested in going into neuroscience research and neuroscience programs, I recommend checking out the FENS page because there's so many resources available for neuroscience specific topics. There are neuroscience summer schools and winter schools every year on different topics of research. And I spend a whole week in Italy learning from the world-renowned neuroscientists on chemical neuromodulation, and obviously had an amazing time in Europe. So I highly recommend taking advantage of these programs. There are stipends available also, so to help you register and also travel. Finally, science outreach. I am passionate about volunteering and really putting it out there, like what made you, what motivates you to enter science field. And just seeing their excitement at the science festival when we were doing this strawberry DNA extraction at the Philadelphia Science Festival was just incredible. And I was also able to highlight that in my application because that was the one thing I was looking for in a program, whether they had good opportunities for science outreach.
Thanks, Nuri, for sharing your experience. Well, my name is Mariella. I'm originally from Lima, Peru. I pursued a bachelor science degree in biology at the Universidad Peruano Cayetano Heredia, which is a leading university in the biomedical sciences. I was really fortunate to find later on a scholarship to pursue my master because at that time I was not sure to commit for a PhD. So I follow a biochemistry and molecular biology program, and I joined Dionisia Gamboa's laboratory in order to conduct research in malaria. But I knew in my heart that I wanted to go abroad. I knew that United States was a big place to do research. So in the meantime, while I was trying to get my things done in Peru, I tried to networking, as Nuri mentioned, and I was really lucky to find a summer internship in UC Southwestern at the biophysics department. And for me, it was a really grateful experience because it was the first time in such a big institution with leading scientists and in a field that I've never faced in my home country. So I would say that was really good one. I learned how to be more independent. And then when I was trying to get things done, I came back to Peru. I was able to finish and defend my thesis. In the meantime, I was also trying to always apply to things abroad and share my research first in my home country, but also in the States. So while I was trying to get stuff, I was usually looking for opportunities abroad. In the meantime, I also learned that applying to grad school, whenever it is, you need money. So in order to gain some money, I joined a first job in a biotech company in Lima. It was a completely different story from academia, but I think it really helped me to better communicate with people and also see how the world works. In addition to that, I've always been really curious and I like to learn from other people. So one thing that really helps the students to get through this process in the application and makes you a really good candidate is also science outreach. So in Peru, we have this organization, it's called MACTEC, it's a Mini Academy of Science and Technology. We aim to work with little girls from 7 to 12 years old when we can share science led by American scientists, most of them. And I think that also helped me to get in touch with them, learn from the kids, because kids are so curious and have so many questions. They even have questions for doing a PhD. That's really true. So in the meantime, I tried to get all my application done. However, the first time I applied to grad school, it was not successful, but that not limited to me to continue to pursue my dream. So I found Científico Latino. I read about Rob on New York Times. He won a fellowship, a really important one. And then since I'm really curious and I'm always reading, and I will encourage you guys to read as much as you can because there are so many opportunities in this country. I contact them and I went to the website. I read all these blog posts, as also Nuri wrote one back in 2017. And then I read one from Olivia that was really good one. Like she joined as a lab technician to boost her application as well. So since my background was more molecular biology, I wanted to join and program the more challenging one and really different ones. So in the meantime, since I was preparing as well for international tests and everything, I joined as a research assistant in the chemistry department at Católica University, my home country. So this time, everything went better, I would say. I had the opportunity to practice as well interviews with Rob, and also get nurture of all these people here writing and sharing through Científico Latino website. So now currently I'm a second-year student at Stony Brook University. I'm in the Biochemistry and Structural Biology program. One of the reasons I joined this program is because they support diversity, and I think that's a really important point for you guys to look for programs that support diversity. Remember, international students have different pathways from native students. So you might find programs that give more support to international ones. Also, everything is so great in here. You will have plenty of opportunities. But one reason I joined Stony Brook is because we are really close to a national laboratory. It's called Brookhaven National Lab. I've never heard of it before applying to grad school, but you can get really well trained in different fields, especially in the physics and the chemistry ones. And I think it's one option to consider. Where do you want to get your PhD, and where are the experts, and what facilities you can get access to in order to be more trained.
Before we proceed, we have a question.
Sure.
Alexandra asks, do you think gap years can have a disadvantage on a student's application? This student decided to take 3 gap years before graduate school education, and they're worried that they'll have lower chances to get a scholarship because of that. So what do you guys think?
Okay,
I have never heard this.
Yeah, I have taken gap years. I think the most important thing is to be honest while you write down your CV and your statement of purpose. If you're gonna take a gap year, I think it's okay, but try to relate it as much as you can to the science. So if, for example, you're taking one gap year, which is totally fine, it's okay, you need to breathe, your brain needs to breathe. You can do some science outreach, or you can be related to a science program, or try to find some hours at your university for teaching assistant. I think as long as you stay on the path of science, it will be fine. But if you don't show evidence of what you're doing, that might be a bit complicated, but I would recommend you to stay in the science field. I know being in academia sometimes can be really hard. You need to breathe, you want to explore other stuff. But if you really like science, you will find a way to be with it all the time.
Thank you for that question. And thank you guys for answering that as well. Yeah.
And the second thing I would like to highlight is your statement of purpose. Please, I would recommend you to work really hard on it. Remember, graduate programs receive tons of applications every year. So you need to be unique in order to call people's attention. So I think another reason also is that in grad school, you will be writing most of the time because you need to publish, you need to share your science. But it's good, it's a good habit if you guys start writing on time. So that's also one other thing that I learned from Científico Latino website. So we have a lot of statement of purpose examples on the website, but keep in mind that the statement of purpose, it should be a picture of yourself. committee, admission committees should be able to see who you are, even if they don't know you, by reading your statement. So I have highlighted some questions I asked myself, and I also try to put them together in this slide, so you can write a really good essay. So the questions are, what is my motivation, whether to pursue a master or a PhD? What makes me a unique candidate? At this point, you might ask yourself, oh, I need to do all those things. Not necessarily, but if you write them in a clear way, in a motivated way, and you explain yourself better in detail, I think people will have better picture of you. So it's really important. Why are you unique for this? What is the research area that excites me the most? Most people, as was in my case, I try to look for other things abroad because I want to see how the basic science was. We are in my country, we are just growing little by little on the basic science areas, but I think it's really important to highlight why you're doing this. You are going to travel from miles away from home, so why is that research area excites you? Which laboratory you would like to commit? What would you like to discover? So it's important to always check the faculty. I think, in my personal opinion, I think it's important to check the lab you like. It can be, I don't know, in New York, in California, in Virginia, in Oregon. It does not matter. What matters is which laboratory do you see yourself to commit to pursue your graduate studies. Where the experts are also, right? And where do you see yourself after completing your degree work?
All right, so things to consider before applying. I've only selected 5, but of course there's more. I'm happy to answer more questions about it. But the first thing, as Mariella alluded to, you should know your why. What's your motivation for applying for graduate programs? Really deep, think deeper into the previous experiences, both research related and also your personal life stories, that really kind of guided you towards science and what attracted you to science. And I think having spent some time in this, knowing your why, really will help you with the essay part of it. Research programs, I highly recommend you to read in detail, spend some time on each website or each program that you're applying to figure out what strengths and weaknesses they each have, because sometimes you forget because there are so many programs. We have to prioritize what part of the program that we really like and what we don't like about. And another thing to consider is, do they support diversity? One thing to check is if it's available in the data sheet, how many students, international students, they have applied and also accepted from previous years, and whether they have consistent number of students that are accepted in each program. That's really important so that you have a chance getting in, and they have financial support for that. Choosing the right program is important, obviously. You have to know what aspects of a program is most important to you. It really bogs down to your priorities. What are your non-negotiables to consider? Because that will really help you at the end of the whole application process. Okay, this is a program I'm going to commit to for the next 5 years of my life. So you have to know the top priorities that matter to you most. And then next thing is considering finances. This is something that we don't always talk about, but I think it's important, especially for international students, because we have to make sure that we have enough financial support to be able to support a living, rent, food, transportation, all of those things. The living cost is really something that we have to consider. And this is something where it varies widely from program to program. So understanding whether they have enough support is important. And if they don't talk about it, then you should ask in the interview weekend. Don't be afraid to ask current students and mentors whether they think that it's enough support. And lab availability, I highly encourage you to all apply to programs that have at least 5 labs that are available, they're looking for. And this is kind of why it's important to research programs, not only just the schools, but also the PIs of interest and whether they have funding for the next year, whether they actually have room for the lab to have another student. and that way you can kind of narrow down the programs that are both exciting, but also have enough support for you to join in the next cycle.
So before we proceed, Nuri, so Anna Samalso, they have a question. So this could be directed to you, Nuri, and Mariella. So Anna asks, as an international student, most, if not all places I searched require me to have a professor to sponsor me prior to applying. So if I'm writing about my research interests, should I write specifically to the PI's topic?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, which is one of the most commonly asked questions. Should I reach out to the professors before applying? Yes, absolutely, because not only do you get to introduce yourself and kind of get them to know you as a person about your background and your research experiences, but also ask them questions about whether they have available they have funding available, whether they seem interested in your research and your experiences, and try to kind of feel the vibe for whether they seem excited to have you at school. And that's one way to find out whether there are enough number of labs available to apply for.
Awesome, thank you. There's also one more question. So someone asks, working in the gap years can also possibly be seen as a disadvantage in the application, considering if there are possibly no publications that student has made before the application process.
I think, for example, it's okay if you don't have a publication at that time, but when you ask for a letter of recommendation of the PI that you have worked with, he or she will briefly explain what you have been doing. So even if it did not end in a publication, it's recommendable to have it, but your referee will explain in detail what you have done and what you have achieved. So, but always keep in mind that try to get, at least I would suggest, an abstract or a conference paper, or try to share it. It can be your university, your home country, or even abroad. But always work as an objective that it should be published, even sometimes because of time, because of reagents, or stuff that can happen in our countries might take more time. But I think it will be fine.
I didn't have a publication when I applied, and it made no difference. I think it's really important to note that it's more, what they really care about, what they want to see is that you can articulate complex thought. And so that's one thing that you need to practice, exactly what you did and why you did it, and what the significance of that research was and the implication of that research results that you've seen, because we know publication process, it's long and unpredictable sometimes. And so don't be discouraged to apply if you don't have a publication as of yet.
Thank you, guys. One last question before we proceed. Oho Esther asked, and I believe that this is a question that a lot of students also ask about the differences between a master's and a PhD, but they ask, must they also go through the graduate school process, or I'm assuming PhD process before moving forward to pursue a master's degree? So I believe this is a chronology question.
Yeah, so in European countries, masters are required, but in the US, they're not. I actually had the option of staying at Jefferson for another year to receive a master's before moving on, but I decided not to because that costs money, first of all, and I decided that I wanted to get more real lab experience as a research assistant, and I prioritized that, and I'm really thankful that I did, because I had such a great experience and in the lab. And also got paid for it. So I think it really depends on how additional degree you like how much more value you think the additional degree will bring. In my case, I didn't think that it added more or less than what I did.
Great, thank you.
Yes, and also just would like to add that if you apply to Europe, most of the time you will be asked for a master degree, but also keep in mind that PhD lasts less time, like 3 or 4 years, that's all. So I think it's an advantage to have a master if you want to go to Europe, more specifically. Okay, so general timeline. We have created a general timeline to in months before deadline. So what things you should do. The objective here is to be well organized, have all your documentation ready before the deadline. Don't panic, don't be in a hurry. So 12 months before the deadline, first the deadlines are in the United States in December, in January. I know in Canada it's also December, January. Europe might vary. It depends on the PI most of the time, or the institute that you're going. But here in the United States, if you start working 12 months in advance, you can focus on your coursework and research activities, try to get them done. Also, try to update your social network profiles like LinkedIn or academic Twitter. Nowadays, visibility, online visibility is really important. And I think it's easier sometimes to look for some students' profile and see what they're doing, what they are sharing, what do they like the most. Try to build and update your CV. We have all these examples on how to write a CV or statement, again, are posted in Científico Latino website. One thing I would like you to recommend is try to be as honest as you can. Don't ever lie on a CV, because people who can figure it out. And if you did some stuff that lasts a couple of months, it's okay, add it on your CV. It's totally fine. For international students specifically, you will be asked to complete your English proficiency test, which is TOEFL. This costs a fee, it's $200, and it only lasts for 2 years. Then between 4 and 6 months previous to the deadline, get your GPA conversion. There are online tools on the website. In my case, I didn't do the GPA conversion. I tried to explain how my grade scale works in my country, attach it in my CV, because I didn't have good grades. And also in another situation, when I applied to Canada, they gently sent me a Excel document. So I just need to put my grades and the conversion was done. So I think you can also ask if they have a special work Excel document sheet that you can use for your GPA conversion. Try to have a detailed list of the research programs you want to apply, also with the deadlines and the fee costs. Reach out to labs of interest. That shows you not also that you're really motivated to join the lab, but also to know if they have current funding. Most of the time you want to join, but it's the time that the PI has finished his grant or her grant, so you have to wait some other months. And then, it's important to be an update of what the lab you want to join is on. Draft and revise a statement of purpose. I think that's really, really important. Don't let this at the last moment. And also you can share with us, with senior graduate students, or maybe your mentors or your professors, how you are writing and what that you are explaining. For example, in my case, the first times I was writing this, I went in so many details that sometimes it was unnecessary. So it's important to share it and get feedback. So in that sense, you can move on. Identify your letter writers. That means you should contact your previous PIs if you're from university. Also, if you did an internship in an industry or a biotech company, try to reach them as well. Always on time, and let them know that you are applying for. Try attending recruitment events on campus if you are currently in the United States. But if not, as international students, and now because of the pandemic, there are multiple events on the website online. For example, virtual graduate fairs that you can register, or like this webinar, you guys know, you just register and you start asking questions. I would like to mention that in my case, the first time I applied, I contact the admission committees and I asked for a fee, because at that time I didn't have enough money. And they were really nice with me and put me on a list, and I just sent my application without any cost. And lastly, 2 and 3 months before the deadline, finalize your program selections, set the letter requests and reminders to your previous PIs. What I did was to put all the details of my programs with the links where my PI should upload his letter in a Word document, and also saying a reminder that please don't forget to do this. always in time, because you guys know every university has its deadline. If you're applying to more than 10 schools, it can be a bit overwhelming to the PI. These PIs are always busy and writing grants. So let's keep it simple and easy for you guys have all your documentation on time.
Before we proceed, we have 3 questions. Keep the questions coming. They're all great. So the first question is, they need some advice. So they have contacted a professor. They've agreed to meet on Zoom, which they have. After getting to know each other, they seem just as excited as they was, but said the professors have no funding for them for this upcoming admission cycle. Should they move on?
Yeah, that's really tough. I know. I'm hesitant to say it. Yes, you should probably move on, and not in terms of like, you should completely not disregard that program or that school, but do not count that school or lab as one of the available labs for the next cycle, because the funding situation is really important, especially when the international students are not eligible for most funding opportunities in the US. It's really important to find labs that have good financial support and are willing to support you and know that they can. So you want to find labs that they can.
Yes. Yeah, that happened to me. I got an offer from for conducting PhD in France, but this professor didn't have funding at that time. And then I got the offer for Stony Brook. But also what people have done, and I heard this from some other colleagues, is that if you really want to join the lab, maybe let's say your PI says, okay, maybe in 6 months I will have something, but you also, what you can do is look in your home country if you can get funding to do an internship or get for these 6 months to live abroad. So you go to the United States or wherever you want to go with your own home funding, and you can look this in the National Science Council of Science and Technology. For example, in my country, they most of the time sponsor funding, so you can go abroad and then you come back. So there are always different ways to get in. But yes, if you really you want to commit right now to a PhD and this professor does not have funding, I would say just move on.
Thank you. All right, so next question. So if I have no research experience, is it still advisable to apply to graduate school for a PhD?
Yeah, having research experience is one of the most important things, I would say. But if you don't have it, I would highlight what you can do, what you already know, the classwork, the coursework that you've completed, and what topics of research interest you, and really articulate that interest in detail and be able to show that you are motivated to learn all these different techniques and or generating hypotheses and stuff. So I wouldn't say that it's a end or be all, but it is important. I recommend trying to volunteer in the lab on a part-time base or a shorter time period or something to get some exposure in the lab. And then that way you can also get another additional recommendation letter from that PI.
For sure. Okay. So I lied, there's not 3, there's we have many questions. And so our third question is, how many graduate schools do you recommend that we should apply to as international students?
5 to 10.
10.
Yep.
It really, I mean, it's actually, these are some of the questions that we were planning on answering in the frequently asked questions. But yeah, 5 to 10, it really, like, the limiting factor is the budgeting, because each application costs anywhere from $75 to $125. And that really limits the number of schools that you can apply, which is why it's important to contact the professors to know how many people are available to accept you in the next cycle. So you can kind of narrow down the number of options here.
Correct.
And we have in the chat box, Stefan, so they ask, if you completed your undergraduate degree in the United States, are you still required to do the TOEFL?
No, you do not. Yeah, we should make that clear on this slide, but no, you do not.
Yeah, it's only for international students outside USA.
Yeah, I didn't have to do that. I was really thankful.
Awesome. Okay, Maria, she asks, should one mention and or describe high school research experiences in a personal statement, or only those that took place during or after the undergraduate degree? Thank you.
What is it?
Well, I would say that you should mention the most important ones. It can be in high school, during undergrad, or even as a child, but just highlight the most important ones that have an impact in your life. I would say that.
Yeah, I have multiple types of research experiences in different diseases and different systems. And I thought that was going to make me look less desirable just because it potentially made it look like I was not able to commit to one thing. And when I asked one of the admissions committee member, and he said, no, it's great because that means you've tried it all and then you decided to commit to one. And so that kind of shows some level of like motivation for why you want to do this.
For sure. Okay, so we're gonna go with one more question, and then we're gonna let Nuri and Mariella finish their presentation, and then towards the end they will discuss frequently asked questions, and also we'll have a Q&A session as well. But I know Raquel, so you've asked about whether or not how to do the GPA conversion, and also that you expect to graduate in July of next year, and you are worried about programs that demand an official transcript for applying. Would you mind explaining what that means? And also, do you need a degree for the application process? So programs that demand an official transcript for applying. Yeah.
So I have not done the GPA conversion because my undergraduate degrees were here in the States. But I would say if there's a complication with the timeline, I would highly recommend reaching out to the program directors or the coordinators to explain your situation and see what they say about, because also COVID, a lot of things are kind of up in the air. So I would recommend reaching out to them and get their answers.
Yes, and there's also GPA conversion tools online. I've never used it, as I mentioned. But you can always ask the admission committee members. It will be totally fine. As long as you explain and let people know in a clear way, everything will be fine.
All right. So the interview weekend, what to expect there? All right, so there's also, for the interviews, pre, during, and post, there's 3 different processes. But before the interview, you want to make sure that you research the interviewers, because you don't want to not have any questions when they say, do you have any questions for me? You want to make sure you have some questions in the back of your mind to ask, whether it be about their research or about the program itself or the location of the program. To help you with this process, we have the GSMI mock interviews that you can sign up for. I have had a blast last year being a mock interviewer, and it's been really great because it's one thing to explain your research to somebody that is pretty familiar with, but it's another to have to explain that to someone that that has no idea what you're doing. And so practicing that process really helps. And so during the interview weekend, I highly encourage you to just breathe, because you made it this far, and don't feel like this is like half of the game. So you've made it this far. Make eye contact. It's really important to make direct eye contact, because I know in some cultures, like Asian countries, like in South Korea, it's considered rude to look at someone directly in the eye, especially if someone is older. But in the United States, it's showing respect. And so making sure that you follow the cultural norms here, and also give a firm handshake. That gives the first impression is really important. And also don't be afraid to talk about your accomplishments. I know it can feel like I'm bragging, but you shouldn't feel that way, because you're expected to talk about what previous experiences you've had and what you can bring to the table. And so don't feel like you're bragging about yourself. No, you're not. And like I said, so genuine interest in the program by asking questions, it really helps to have a couple of generic questions or more insightful questions to ask during the silent moments. And then while you're doing all this, it may feel like it's stressful, but it's really a lot of fun. Have fun and try to keep track of all the things that you liked and did not like about the program. It's good to talk to those current students or current trainees to ask their insights about, because they're usually pretty honest about their whole experience. So especially the negative ones, you should really keep in mind those negative experiences that you hear about. Also, I should mention that because international students tend to live very far, you may have to compensate for your own flights if it's an in-person interview. There's a certain threshold for like about $500 that the school will cover, but then on top of that, you may have to support yourself. And so keep in mind that that could happen, or they could ask you to do a virtual call or a Skype interview instead. It's never the same to not have an in-person interview, but it's also very important to still practice your virtual Zoom setting. And after the interview, make sure you send thank you emails. It's highly recommended to make sure that you show your respect for the interviewers for their time, and also it's an opportunity for you to reiterate your interest in the program and ask any remaining questions you may have. And also after that, just decompress and forget about it.
Nuri, so we have one question. Since you're talking about interviews, we have a question from earlier from Michael Ramirez. They ask how to approach PIs generally, asking for possibilities to join, for additional funding, and et cetera, et cetera.
So PIs are busy, so keep it short and sweet. I basically start out my email saying, hello, so-and-so. My name is Nuri, and I received bachelor's degrees from this country, from this university in this degrees, and then discuss my interest in the lab. I have been motivated to apply to XYZ program, and I'd be interested in talking to you more about your research topics and whether there is an interest in recruiting another student in the next year. So even if you haven't submitted your application yet, you can at least send that email. And I mean, the worst thing they can say is not respond or say no. And so don't be afraid to reach out and say, I will be interested in talking to you either by phone or Skype. Here's my CV, and I'll be excited to talk to you.
Awesome. Okay, and there was one question from Nguyen Vo, and this was from earlier. And so before I proceed, so they ask, they say, I have a good record of research experience and presentations in the field of cell biology and neurodevelopment, but my passion is in virology, and I plan to apply for a PhD program in virology or microbiology. Would this lower my chances of getting in?
Oh, that's a really tough question because
yes.
I think it's great that you have an extensive research experience, and you can expand on that. Like, what made you decide that you want to pursue virology versus a previous experience? I think I don't think they're going to look at it as like a limitation because you don't have any previous experience necessarily, because you do have a transferable skill such as critical thinking, reading papers, and being able to articulate your science to the public. All of those things matter regardless of the topic of research or model system or any of that nature. And so I wouldn't think that as a weakness. But I would think hard about it and be prepared to discuss why you decide to make that switch.
Yes, I will prepare myself to answer that question. But if you have the chance to find an internship or a lab technician position in the field you want to pursue, like virology, I will go for it.
Mm-hmm. And one last question. I know that there are two other questions in Q&A, but for now, so we have a question. So they say, Renan says, I think my research background is strong. I have 5 publications, created groups, experience on science outreach, but I've done 2 internships abroad, but my grades are not high because of how my university grades students. My GPA is around 75%, but the average grade of students in university is 66%. Even though it seems like a low GPA, I'm slightly above average. So how much will this hurt my chances?
Well, your application will see as a whole. It will be evaluated as a whole. So it's okay if one of the requirements is not what they are asking you for. I would encourage you to apply for the program you want to. So don't be discouraged about it. We are human beings. Nothing is perfect. So just go for it.
And also, I would note that even though this was not my grades, it was actually GRE when they used to take the GREs. I did not have a good verbal score on my GRE, and I was really, I thought it was going to really hurt my chances. And so I reached out to the admissions committee members, program directors. This is what's happening. I have this such and such research experience, and I'm really interested in attending this program. But do you think this is competitive? And I bluntly asking them actually gives them a straightforward answer. And they said, it's a little bit low, but it's still above average and it's fine. So I think having that clear answer before you have submit your application either saves your money or time or inspires you to apply, because they are already introduced to you, and so they will be more familiar with it.
Awesome.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm accepted. Woohoo! What is next? So there's money. It comes to money. So as an international student, once I got accepted, I was really happy. But at the same time, I was a big panicking because there are so many stuff that you need to get ready. So they will contact you and they will send you a document. It's called I-24, which states that you have been accepted to the United States to pursue a PhD program or a master, but you have to pay for it. So it costs $200. And at the same time, you need to arrange your appointment at your embassy, which is $160. That's for the, so for PhD programs, you will be issued a F1 visa. So that's the money that it costs. One other thing really important is get your immunization records. That means when you were a baby or when a child, you get vaccinated, right? So you need to prove that you have received the doses for those diseases. So in my case, my records were really, really old and I couldn't even see them. So you can ask your doctor if they already have, if you have it, or signed by your doctor, or you can go to a hospital or a health post and ask for get the antibody blood tests. So you will prove in that way that you indeed have been vaccinated before, but keep in mind that if you didn't have a vaccine at that moment, some vaccines might take multiple doses. So consider time between multiple doses and the time you are leaving your country to come here to the United States. So that's also additional money, right? Send official transcripts. That means, for example, in Peru, all our documentation is in Spanish. So in US universities, they want official translation in English, which you can get contact to a local translator in your city, but also you need to send them. So you can use a courier international service like FedEx or DHL. So that takes time, but also money. But it's really quick. So within a week, they will receive all your documentation. So that in that process, and don't let this until last moment, because you need to get enrolled, you need to get your health insurance. So all those procedures to be a legal student needs to be on time. So keep in mind that you need to send that as quickly as possible. So money really matters, as I've been saying, because it matters. You may not receive your first paycheck until the month of September. So you need to consider the money you're going to spend in relocation, in your rent. So if, for example, when I was in Peru, I was trying to look for an apartment here, but it was so expensive because New York area is so expensive. So at the end, I'm living on campus, but they also asked me for a security deposit. So I just deposit that amount. I had like booked my room. And then when I came, I started paying my first month of rent. Also consider the food you're gonna eat. You need to eat well, and you need to really care about your health in grad school. And also health insurance. Most universities, I think, they give you the option to have a health insurance, but I've heard from people that already live here, most Americans, they have their own. So it's totally fine. And universities also ask you for pay a student fee every academic semester. So keep in mind that you might receive an X amount of your paycheck, but in some months from every year you will have to pay stuff. And since we are in an economic pandemic situation, it's really hard, and sometimes fees get raised. But there are ways that you can always, once you are more familiar, you can also ask your PI to pay your fees. But I would recommend you to have a really good budget and how to handle your finances properly.
All right, so moving on to the fellowships for international students. Like I mentioned, international students are not eligible for most of the government funding available in the US, available for US citizens or permanent residents. So that's green card holders. And so these funding includes NIH, NRSA, or NSF, or Department of Defense. All these funding agencies do not have funding support available for international students. And so what I would consider is that securing your own funding helps from your home country. Sometimes it's available, but don't feel discouraged if you don't have it, because I didn't have any. And it's not required or expected. So don't feel like you have to have it. And also, once you become a doctoral candidate or a doctoral student, you can apply for some of the funding available that comes in all shapes and sizes. And so that can really help you with boosting your CV for future career options. So I have some flow chart for you. So there's some funding sources for pre-doctoral students. It can be largely divided into two, either internal or external funding. For internal case, it can be either program specific. So this can be something like merit-based scholarships or alumni donors or honorary mentions or something like that. For example, I received Michael Kukar Graduate Fellowship in Neuroscience at Emory. And so these are only available to students that are already enrolled in neuroscience program. In a wider internal fellowship is a school-wide teaching fellowships. And in most cases, they have some sort of a dissertation completion fellowships. And so I highly recommend looking into those, especially if you're interested in going into academia. Teaching fellowship can really help and boost your career CV. And then for external funding sources, there are 3 different flavors. Of course, there's your home country funding, but I wanted to focus on 3 different external funding sources. One is conferences. And so this is travel grants. There can be grants for awards for best poster or best oral talks. Or recently, I was a social media ambassador for the American Neurological Association meeting. And this is where you can get a registration fee waived and kind of have fun with social media, representing the talks and events going on, and try to engage the public with in the scientific discussion. So that was really fun. The second thing is industry sponsors. And so this can be of interest to computational neuroscience or computer science majors. So like companies like Facebook, Google, Microsoft, they have PhD fellowships and they offer full tuition as well as stipends. And so some of the cases, they either invite you to their headquarters to meet with the company scientists, or also offer an internship. And so it can be really useful for you if you're interested in going into that industry route. Another thing is private foundations to consider. This tends to be topic specific. And so depending on what research you're doing, there may be some funding grants available for specific research projects. So it can be like American Heart Association or American Epilepsy Society, where only those who are intimately related to the mission of their private foundation could be applying for these grants. So look into those once you have identified what research topic you're studying, and there are plenty of options available. So don't be discouraged if you don't have any already. All right, so frequently asked questions. I think we asked probably most of the questions. Yes. How many programs should I apply for? Like I said, 5 to 10 programs. Again, The budgeting is really the limiting factor. And so try to limit that by reaching out to professors early on to figure out how many labs are actually available for you to join the next cycle.
Yeah, where can I see some examples? Just check our writing center on the website. There are tons of examples. I always learning from them, so just check them.
Should I reach out to the professors? Yes, I've been saying this like a million times. You should totally mention them. You should mention their names in your application so that you can kind of introduce yourself and the PIs of interest, and also mention those names in your application.
I might consider less competitive if I don't have funding publications. Not necessarily, these things can help, but are not mandatory. If you have them, great. If not, there's no reason to be discouraged.
So if there's any more questions, there are a list of frequently asked questions someone put together, and it's really helpful to go through. And so link is available. The slides will be available after the talk. So please check it out. And here are some resources and links that you might find useful. So first is data on international students in the US. So some of the stats that I showed you were all found here. Fellowship opportunities available for international students are listed here, and also visa applications. With that, I really I hope that you guys find this helpful. And if there's any more questions, general questions can be asked in the Científico Latino at gmail.com or Slack channel. We have an international channel on Slack. You can join us on Facebook or Twitter, and we have listed our email addresses as well as Twitter handles. So I have to hear from you.
Yes, anytime.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. All right. So we have a couple questions, actually. So Jimmy, I see you. I know that you've asked this question a bit ago. And so you've asked, who do you consider as a suitable applicant for a master's program versus a PhD program? Can you describe briefly the ideal applicant with the necessary skills for these two distinct programs? Thanks.
Do you want to go for that?
You first.
Sorry, could you repeat?
Mm-hmm. So I believe what Jimmy asked was, what are the necessary skill sets for an applicant? You know,
Got it, I see.
If he, she, or they want to pursue master's versus PhD.
So I've never pursued a master's, and I think part of the main reason was a financial budget issue. But I think one of the qualities PhD programs look for in the candidate are the really critical thinking skills, being able to think big picture of the project and implications. I think that's really difficult as a student when you're used to in a college program where you're just kind of soaking in all the information that's given to you and not searching out for new information. And so that's a shift in mindset. I think it's kind of difficult and to practice, but you can gain that skill through research, reading papers, asking questions, really ask questions in talks, and don't be afraid to feel dumb for a second, because that's one thing I learned, to ask questions, and because that helps me learn faster and more efficiently. So I think an ideal application, I would see in the statement of purpose that you have considered some of the interests that were available to you, and what drew you into those interests, and then also what skill sets you currently have would benefit the current project that you're interested in. So I think, yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And they will always evaluate your motivation, the reason why you're pursuing whether a master or a PhD. But I think it's important to have the research experience needed. Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that question. All right, so Maria, so you've asked, Maria says, I have been told that one needs to have contacted the potential supervisors before mentioning their names in the personal statement. Do you agree with this? Thank you.
Totally. I think I must have reached out to like 50 people. I think I kept sending emails and really tailoring my emails depending on their interest or based on the fit that I saw between the PI and me, and really kind of trying to gauge their interest in me also. So once I figured out how many people I actually could see myself working with, I mentioned those names in my application to make it more tailored towards a particular program, because you do need to discuss why this particular program interests you in your application, and highlighting that like the strengths of the programs that you've researched, right? And also the things that you've learned on a maybe recruitment weekend or talking to the professors or students can really help you tailor towards that program specifically. And then it's not just a generic program that you're applying to.
Yes, and I would also try to contact former graduate students or people that are in their last years of PhD to first have an idea of how the lab environment is, how demanding can be projects. So don't be afraid to contact people. I think it's okay. But I will also, well, one thing I do most of the time, when I read a paper and I find a really cool scientist, I check like his genealogy tree. So he got trained by who or something like that. So I know, oh, okay, so that lab might be more oriented to this field or to another. But also you can contact graduate students and they will let you know how it is. But yeah, try to read as much as you can. And yeah.
Alrighty, thank you. So in the Q&A box now, so we have two questions. The first question is, so you said that we need to start preparing roughly a year in advance. I'm graduating in spring. Is it too late to start applying now if I want to start next fall?
Oh. I won't say it's late. It's never late, but you will be on a hurry, I guess, because you need to contact your former PIs for the letters and everything. I mean, it's up to you, but I will plan things more carefully and have a strong application, because at the end of the day, you are investing time and money, and that economical situation might vary between people. So if I want to have a safe option, I will just start working from now on with all this advice that you are being receiving, and then apply next year. And also the other thing is, because of the pandemic, I don't know exactly like how it's going to be then, but I will try to keep it like planification. I think it's a key here. So it's up to you at the end of the day. I mean,
anything is possible, I would say, but don't underestimate the amount of time it takes for you to complete an application, especially the statement of purpose part, because I think I had to rewrite so many, I had so many revised versions of them, because this is one document that you can share your personal history with them, and this kind of on the only portion of the application that can tell you a little bit more about yourself as a person, rather than just a metrics. And so really, I think I wouldn't say like it's too late, because anything is really possible if you put your mind to it. But think carefully about start outlining, brainstorming, and contacting professors now, so that you have an idea of how many labs are actually available and can take you in next year.
Okay, so our second question. I know that there's usually limited funding for master's programs, but are there any places where I can find funded master's programs?
I've seen some European master's programs that were funded fully. I don't have any experience with that. Do you, Mariella?
I only know about Erasmus scholarship for doing a master's in Europe. That's the only one I know, Erasmus. Yeah, there are some like agencies that can, also there's one from the UK. I think it's called, I don't remember the name now, But what you can do is check on every embassy. For example, check the UK embassy, Canada embassy, Belgium embassy, and check they have like this big contest to attract international students, and you can get funding for doing the master. So I will always check on them.
So lastly, for you, Nuri, from Maria. So she says, thank you so much, Nuri. Those professors would presumably know that you were going to mention their names in a personal statement, right?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I didn't directly say that I'm going to mention your name in my application, but once I had a communication with them, it's kind of expected, or it's not too much of a surprise that they have in communication. Even the admissions committees will consider, like, think that you have probably in communication with them if you mention their name.
Awesome. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we'll give you guys a few more seconds to quickly type in your questions. But if you guys have more questions throughout the way, please feel free to email us at cientificolatino@gmail.com, and also Mariella and Nuri's emails as well. And so that's all to be provided. Yes. Yeah. And also, this webinar will as well be recorded. It has been recording, and it'll be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. And so if there are any things that you missed or you want to refer back into a webinar, you will have the ability to do so shortly after this webinar. Yes. Okay. So with that, thank you so much. Thank you, Nuri and Mariella, for sharing your wisdom with all of us. I've learned so much from you two alone, and so I'm sure that our participants as well have learned so much from this webinar.
Yeah, thanks to everyone that joined this webinar today. I love the questions.
Yeah, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. Yeah, mine is Nuri Scientist, so you can remember.
Yeah, mine's a bit harder, but just send me an email. I will just write it really quickly, but slides will be posted, so I think it's okay.